The ocean kept its secrets for 1,000 generations. But the first signal shattered that silence. It rose from the deep like a breath, returning to a long dormant world.
The signal repeats. It is coming from inside the exclusion zone. It is your son.
Nathan Hayes had sworn he would never hear again.
As governments scrambled to interpret the broadcasts.
Get me confirmation now.
We need actionable intel immediately.
And coastal storms, swelled with unnatural force.
Nathan and Elise were drawn into the heart of a global mystery that defied science and memory alike.
It was calling, searching for them.
Now, with nations on edge, and the Pacific trembling under the weight of something awakening,
Nathan must confront the truth he has feared. Some connections stretch beyond loss, beyond time.
And even beyond the limits of the world they knew.
The morning mist rolled in from the Atlantic, soft and silver, wrapping Harbor Point in a hush that felt almost sacred. The docks were half awake, creaking wood, gulls calling above, and the rhythmic scrape of a wire brush against steel. That sound came from Elias Wren. He moved like a man who'd learned efficiency from necessity. Every motion precise, nothing wasted. His hands were scarred, his shoulders broad beneath a faded flannel, and his eyes, the kind you didn't meet for long, the kind that had seen things no one ever put in an after-action report. Steam rose from his coffee thermos, caught by the cold. He set it beside the hull of the old trawler he was restoring, the Harriet Blue. The boat was missing 3 ribs and half her paint, but she floated. That was enough. "Dad?" He turned. Maya stood on the dock with her backpack slung over one shoulder, violin case in the other hand. 17, with the same stubborn chin as her mother and a look in her eyes that said she knew more than he wished she did. "You left without breakfast again," she said. Elias wiped his hands on a rag and gave the faintest smile. "Coffee's a food group." "Not according to Ms. Ruiz." He looked up sharply, then relaxed. "The music teacher. She said you promised to come by the school this week." "I did?" "You nodded. That counts." She held out a folded permission slip. "Field trip to Rockford Naval Base next week. Orchestra's been invited to play for some military ceremony. They need chaperones." He froze. The sound of gulls dimmed. "Rockford?" Maya nodded, watching him. "They said there'll be officers, veterans, a few big names. Admiral Haynes, I think." The rag in his hand tightened until his knuckles went white. Then, as if catching himself, Elias smoothed his expression and took the paper. "You want to go?" "Yeah, it's important. The school's trying to save the music program." He studied the form as if it contained classified intel. Then he pulled a pen from his shirt pocket and signed without another word. Maya noticed his handwriting. Steady, exact, the kind of script that looks like it belongs on mission logs, not permission slips. "You could come, you know," she said. "They always need parents." Elias placed the paper in her hand. "You'll do fine." She exhaled, part disappointment, part resignation. "You never come to school stuff." "I'm better with boats than people." Maya laughed softly, but it didn't reach her eyes. "You mean better with things that don't ask questions." He looked up then, and for a heartbeat the air seemed to stop moving. "Some questions don't need answers," he said quietly. Maya didn't argue. She'd grown used to that tone, the one that ended conversations like closing a door. She slung the violin case higher and walked toward the road. "Ms. Ruiz said to tell you she's bringing by music sheets later," she called over her shoulder. "Tell her I'll be here," he said, though he already was every day. When she disappeared past the row of sheds, Elias let out a long breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He went back to work, but his rhythm had changed. Faster, less controlled. The clang of the hammer echoed harder against the metal hull. Every strike seemed to shake loose something buried deep. By mid-morning, the fog had burned off, revealing the horizon, a long gray line where sea met sky. He stood there, wiping sweat and salt from his brow, eyes fixed on the distance. Beyond that horizon lay a desert that still lived inside him. Dust, gunfire, a radio voice screaming "abort mission," and the sound of a child crying in a language he never learned to forget. Elias closed his eyes. The waves lapped against the dock, gentle and relentless. He whispered, almost to himself, 7 years, and the ocean still knows. Then, as if sealing the thought away, he bent down, reached beneath his shirt collar, and adjusted a thin chain. For an instant, the morning light caught the edge of a small metal tag, burnished, unmarked, and worn smooth by years of silence. He tucked it back under his collar and went on working, the sound of steel and sea blending into one quiet rhythm. Somewhere down the road, a gull cried, and the foghorn moaned across the bay like a memory returning home. As dusk fell, Elias shut down the lights in the dockyard. When he turned to lock the office, a folded slip of paper caught his eye. It had fallen from Maya's backpack. He picked it up, unfolding the page. A single line was scrawled in her hurried handwriting. "If you don't come, they'll think I have no one." He stood there for a long time, the wind off the water cutting colder than usual. Then he set his jaw, slipped the note into his pocket, and reached for his jacket. The night fog rolled in as he stepped off the dock, boots thudding softly against the planks. For the first time in years, he walked toward the town lights instead of away from them. The gymnasium at Harbor Point High buzzed with low chatter and folding chairs, scraping across varnished floors. The air smelled faintly of coffee, dust, and something nostalgic, like chalk and ambition. On stage, Clara Ruiz adjusted the microphone. Her calm presence silenced the room faster than the principal ever could. "Thank you all for coming," she began. "Next week, our orchestra will perform at Rockford Naval Base for the annual Remembrance Ceremony." Polite applause, the kind people give when they don't yet understand the weight of what they've heard. From the back row, Elias Wren sat stiffly, hands folded over his knee. The chair groaned under him like it resented the intrusion. His flannel shirt smelled faintly of sea oil, and his expression hadn't changed since he walked in. Neutral, unreadable. He wasn't supposed to be here. He'd promised himself that much, but then he'd found that note. "If you don't come, they'll think I have no one." So here he was, trying not to look like a man on foreign ground. On stage, Clara continued, "The Navy has asked our students to play a piece written by an enlisted composer, someone who never made it home. It's called The Horizon Suite. We're honored to carry that memory forward." Elias shifted slightly. The title struck somewhere old, familiar. Beside him, Maya leaned forward, eyes bright, whispering, "Isn't it incredible? Real soldiers, Dad. Real history." He managed a quiet nod, though the words "real soldiers" twisted something in his chest. Principal Garner stepped up, all enthusiasm. "We'll need volunteers to help with transportation and security clearance. Background checks will be quick. Anyone interested, please see Miss Ruiz after the meeting." Elias almost stood up to leave, but Clara's next words stopped him. "I know this performance may feel symbolic," she said, "but to some, it's personal. The music we play isn't just notes on paper. It's names, it's service, it's silence carried forward." Her eyes drifted to the back, not searching, just landing, and met his for the briefest second. And in that second, Elias realized she knew. Not details, not history. but the kind of knowing that comes from seeing the same distance in someone's eyes. When the meeting ended, the crowd dissolved into chatter. Parents huddled near sign-up tables. Teachers exchanged polite words. Maya darted off to hug her friends, violin case bumping against her leg. Elias stayed seated until the room emptied halfway. Then Clara approached. Soft steps, calm voice. "You made it," she said. Elias straightened. "Wasn't planning to. I figured." Her tone was easy, unjudging. "But I'm glad you did." He nodded once, unsure how to answer. "I wanted to thank you," Clara said. "Maya's been one of my most dedicated students. She doesn't just play, she listens. That's rare." Elias allowed a hint of a smile. "She got that from her mother." Clara studied him for a moment. "And the silence?" He looked away, eyes tracing the floorboards. "That's mine." The honesty surprised even him. Clara folded her arms, leaning slightly against the edge of the stage. "I used to work at Rockford, music therapy rotation for returning personnel. Some of the faces that came through there..." She paused as if testing his reaction. "It changes how you hear the ocean." He froze, just for a heartbeat. Clara caught it but said nothing. She just smiled faintly and handed him a small card. "Volunteer form, in case you decide to come." He took it, fingers brushing hers. The paper was light, almost fragile. Outside, rain had started again, soft against the asphalt. Maya jogged ahead toward the truck, her laughter mixing with the sound of tires hissing through puddles. Elias followed slowly, slipping the volunteer card into his pocket. In the driver's seat, Maya glanced at him. "So, you like her?" He blinked. "Who?" "Ms. Ruiz. You were smiling." He smirked. "That was just gravity." She laughed. "You should come, Dad. You'd actually understand those people, more than anyone." He started the engine. The wipers swept the windshield once, clearing a streak of fog. "Maybe," he said quietly. "But sometimes, understanding's the hardest part." Maya tilted her head. "You mean remembering?" Elias didn't answer. He watched the rain bead along the glass, gathering, merging, falling, like memories that refused to stay separate. Later that night, he unfolded the volunteer card again. A handwritten note was scribbled at the bottom in blue ink. "For what it's worth, I think music remembers what words can't. CR." Elias looked out the window toward the dark harbor, and somewhere deep inside, something long muted shifted. Not forgiveness, not regret, just the faint sound of an old tide turning. The morning of the ceremony arrived clear and cold, the kind of cold that sharpened everything. The air, the light, even the sound of the waves against the concrete pier. Rockford Naval Base loomed ahead as the buses rolled past the front gate. Flags lined the road, snapping against a crisp Atlantic wind. Security officers checked IDs with mechanical precision. From the passenger seat of the last bus, Elias Wren watched the ocean through fogged glass. He hadn't worn a uniform in nearly a decade, but the sound of boots on tarmac still made his pulse sink to a rhythm he couldn't unlearn. Beside him, Clara Ruiz scanned a clipboard. "You okay?" she asked gently. Elias nodded, eyes still fixed on the horizon. "Just a lot of ghosts in this place." She smiled faintly. "Then maybe today's about giving them a song." Maya leaned over the seat in front of him, violin case clutched tight. "Dad, did you see the carrier? It's huge." He followed her finger toward the dock where the gray silhouette of the USS Providence towered above the bay. "Yeah," he said softly. "I've seen her before." "What, really?" Elias didn't answer. He didn't need to. Clara caught the look in his eyes and filled in the silence. The ceremony began at noon. Rows of chairs faced a temporary stage draped in navy blue. The audience was a mosaic of uniforms, white, blue, and khaki, interspersed with civilians holding small flags or folded programs. Behind the stage stood the sea, vast and unbroken, as if guarding the event itself. The orchestra took their places, tuning strings and woodwinds as the murmur of conversation settled. Maya adjusted her chin rest, her hand trembling slightly. From where he sat near the back, Elias could see every detail. The slight tremor in her bow hand, the small crease of focus between her brows. She was her mother all over again, calm under pressure, except for the eyes. When the base commander stepped to the podium, the crowd rose for the anthem. Elias's posture stiffened instinctively. His hand hovered over his chest, then fell before touching it. "Today," the commander said, "we honor those who served beneath the waves, whose missions were never known, whose sacrifices were silent but enduring." Elias's jaw tightened. Beneath the waves. Clara, from the orchestra section, glanced toward him. He wasn't hearing the speech. He was somewhere else entirely. The commander continued. "Among those names is Lieutenant Commander Hannah Wren, communications officer aboard the USS Providence, lost at sea, June 2012. Maya's bow froze mid-air. The words didn't hit Elias like thunder. They landed like gravity, slow, absolute, inescapable. He'd known, of course. He'd lived through every briefing, every recovery that never came. But hearing her name in public for the first time felt like reopening the ocean itself. Clara's voice over the mic steadied the air. And now the students of Harbor Point High will perform the Horizon Suite, written in her memory. The first note rose, a violin so clear it cut through wind. Maya played with a precision that wasn't taught. Each note shimmered with something older than youth, something that carried pain and pride all at once. Elias didn't move. The melody unfolded like a message he'd been waiting years to receive. He saw her, the woman who used to hum while sealing field cables, who laughed louder than the surf, who said she'd name their daughter after the first dawn they'd watched together. And then he saw the last image burned into his mind. Her on the Providence's deck, sunlight on her hair, the helicopter blades spinning, her final salute before the world turned to storm and radio silence. The music built, strings swelling, brass echoing like distant thunder. Clara conducted with closed eyes, as if guiding something sacred through the air. When the final chord hung suspended, the silence that followed wasn't absence, it was reverence. Elias stood, slowly, deliberately. His applause came last, softer than the rest, but it lasted longer. The crowd rose in ovation. Maya lowered her violin, cheeks wet, breath shaking. She looked toward the back, found him in the crowd. He lifted 2 fingers in a small salute, not military, not formal, just personal. Recognition between 2 survivors of the same storm. After the ceremony, the crowd dispersed to the pier for the wreath-laying. A Navy officer placed the memorial wreath into the water as the ship's bell tolled 3 times. Elias lingered near the edge, away from the cameras. The sea was calm now, deceptive in its peace. Clara approached, coat pulled tight against the breeze. "You didn't tell me," she said softly. He didn't look at her, didn't see the point. "She was your wife." He nodded once. "She wrote the suite, didn't she?" That made him turn. "How'd you know?" "Because it doesn't sound like mourning," Clara said. "It sounds like forgiveness." Elias's throat tightened. "She sent me the sheet music the night before her last mission, said it was just an experiment. I never listened to it until today." They stood in silence for a moment, waves licking the concrete below. Then, from the far end of the pier, a sudden burst of commotion. Sailors murmured, pointing toward the water. A low mechanical hum rose from the deep. Elias turned sharply. The sound was unmistakable, a sonar pulse, faint but deliberate. "What is that?" Clara asked. He stepped closer to the edge, eyes scanning the rippling surface. "It's not a ship. It's deeper." The hum came again, patterned. 2 tones, then silence. He felt his pulse quicken. No, it couldn't be. Clara watched his expression shift from confusion to disbelief. "Elias," he whispered almost to himself. "It's a recognition code, submarine frequency, Providence's old handshake signal." The waves rolled in steady rhythm. The crowd hadn't noticed. Only Elias stood frozen, hearing what no one else could. And far beneath the surface, something answered back. One long tone, low and haunting. The same pitch used for mission complete. He closed his eyes, breath unsteady. Clara touched his arm. "What is it?" He exhaled slowly. "It means she's not gone. Not all of her." That night, Harbor Point was quiet, except for the foghorn echoing every 12 seconds, a sound so steady it could lull even guilt to sleep. But Elias Wren wasn't sleeping. He sat in the dockyard's workshop, a single lamp glowing above the workbench. The rest of the room was shadows and silence. The Harriet Blue floated outside in the dark, rocking gently with the tide. On the bench lay a set of weathered headphones, a small black radio receiver, and a single notepad filled with hand-drawn frequency graphs. Elias adjusted the dial by instinct, searching through static. It had been hours since the sound at the ceremony, that low mechanical hum, the one only he had reacted to. Everyone else thought it was feedback from the ship's sonar demonstration. He knew better. He'd spent a lifetime listening to the ocean. This wasn't feedback. It was intentional. He rubbed his eyes, fatigue blurring his vision. "Come on, show me you're real." Then, faint, buried beneath the noise, a pulse. 2 quick bursts. Pause. Then one long tone. He froze. It was the same code sequence used by the Providence during encrypted transmissions. No one outside her crew should even recognize it. Elias scribbled the pattern into the notebook, then cross-referenced it against old logs. His hand trembled as the realization formed. The frequency wasn't random. It was targeting an obsolete channel, one last used 13 years ago. The message repeated, but this time, between the bursts of sound, a faint modulation, too subtle to be sonar. It was voice-coded. He grabbed a pair of headphones, pressed them tight over his ears, and ran the playback through an old decryption tool he'd kept for nostalgia. The static thinned, the distortion cleared, and a voice, broken, mechanical, but human, filtered through the noise. "Elias Wren, access granted." He stopped breathing. That voice hadn't crossed the airwaves in over a decade. "Elias, mission status, completed, awaiting confirmation." The light above him flickered once. The room felt smaller, heavier. He whispered, "Hannah?" Static answered, then a tone so low it rattled the bolts in the wall. He stumbled back from the desk, heart pounding. He wanted to run, to breathe, to stop hearing ghosts. But instead, he turned the volume higher. "Unit Providence. Sequence Echo 7 confirmed. Data transmission pending. Recipient authorization required. Commander Elias Wren." He stared at the receiver. Commander. That title hadn't been spoken in years, not since he'd buried it under a new name, a new life, a new silence. He swallowed hard, reached for the mic, and spoke softly. "This is Elias Wren. Authorization revoked. Providence, you're not supposed to be active." A pause, then a reply. Softer this time, like an echo caught in the deep. "Mission parameters incomplete. Final directive unresolved." He sat back, staring at the dark beyond the window. The harbor lights shimmered against the black surface of the water. Somewhere out there, beneath the calm, something was awake. He spoke again. "Providence, what directive?" "Retrieve, final witness." The line went dead. Elias stared at the silent receiver for a full minute before realizing he was gripping the mic so hard his knuckles were white. He exhaled shakily. "No, you can't still be running. You were lost." He looked around the workshop as if expecting the shadows to argue back. That was when the knock came, a single hesitant rap against the door. He turned off the receiver instinctively, covering it with a rag before crossing the room. When he opened the door, Clara Ruiz stood under the yellow light, wrapped in a raincoat, a thermos in one hand. "Couldn't sleep," she said simply. "Neither could you, I guess." He tried to muster a smile. "That obvious?" "You left halfway through the reception today. she said, stepping inside. Maya said you looked haunted. He hesitated. Just an old sound. Memory trick. Clara set the thermos on the table. I know what I heard, too. That made him freeze. You heard it? Not the words, she said, sitting down, but the pattern. I used to volunteer with sonar recovery teams for therapy programs. That wasn't a glitch. It was deliberate. He sat opposite her, eyes searching hers. You think it's from the wreck? She nodded, or something built to echo it. He rubbed a hand over his face. You sound like you've seen this before. I felt it, she said softly, when something that should have ended doesn't. The workshop filled with the sound of distant foghorns, long and low. Finally, Clara reached into her coat and slid a small envelope across the table. This came to the school this afternoon, addressed to you, no return label. Elias frowned, tearing it open. Inside was a printed strip of paper, an old teletype code, and below it, a single sentence typed cleanly. Harbor depth 214, confirm the truth. He felt the air leave his lungs. Depth 214. That was the exact coordinate of the Providence's last known position. Clara watched his expression harden. What does it mean? He folded the paper carefully. It means someone wants me to dive where no one should. You can't go out there alone. He stood, already reaching for his coat. I don't have a choice. She rose too, blocking his path. Elias, this isn't about ghosts. If something's still transmitting down there, it's not your wife. It's a system, a program. You'll get yourself killed chasing a signal. He met her eyes. Steady, quiet. The same look that had carried him through darker nights than this. You don't get it. She built that program. Every line of code had her fingerprints. If something's still alive down there... He trailed off, voice trembling. Then maybe part of her is too. Clara looked at him for a long time, then finally said, Then you're not going without me. He blinked. You? I'm certified. I've done naval dives for recovery work. You'll need someone topside. He hesitated, then nodded slowly. Sunrise. As she turned to leave, he called after her, Clara. She looked back. If I don't come back... She cut him off gently. Then I'll make sure someone listens to what you found. The door closed softly behind her. Elise stood alone again, the sound of the sea filling the space where fear might have lived. He looked down at the receiver. A single light blinked once, then twice, then held steady, like it was waiting. He reached out and whispered, All right, Hannah. One more mission. Outside, the fog rolled in from the Atlantic, swallowing the dockyard in pale silence. Somewhere beneath the surface, a pulse answered. Slow, patient, alive. The dawn came gray and soundless over Rockford Bay, the horizon blurring into mist. By 0500 hours, the old trawler Harriet Blue floated like a ghost at anchor, its deck crowded with cables, oxygen tanks, and a single submersible capsule, matte white aged, still bearing the faded insignia of the U.S. Navy. Elias Wren tightened the last strap on his dive harness. His hands moved with the precision of ritual, every motion born from muscle memory and grief. Across from him, Clara Ruiz checked the pressure valves, her face half lit by the dim deck light. Visibility's going to be 0 past 150 meters, she said. Once we descend, the current turns unpredictable. Elias smirked. Sounds familiar. She looked up, half smiling. You sure you're ready for this? I've been ready for 13 years, he said quietly. The sea didn't care for their resolve. It just waited. Endless, dark, unjudging. The capsule door sealed with a metallic hiss. The world outside vanished, replaced by the hum of compressors and the steady beep of instruments. Pressure equalized, Clara announced. Descent engaged. The surface light faded almost instantly. Water swallowed color first, then shape, then certainty. By 80 meters, the sun was gone. Elias sat forward, watching the digital depth gauge tick down. 120, 150, 180. He spoke softly, not looking up. She used to say the ocean was the only place where sound felt honest. Clara's voice softened. Maybe that's why she sent it back. At 200 meters, the sonar crackled. A faint outline appeared on the screen. Long, cylindrical, motionless. There, Elias said. Hold course. The submersible slowed as the wreck emerged from the dark. USS Providence, its hull torn open along the midsection, draped in silt and coral like a cathedral dressed in mourning. Lights from the capsule swept across the bow. The ship's nameplate was still visible, letters half erased by time. Providence. Clara whispered. It's intact. Elias leaned close to the viewport. That's not all. Look, external power conduit. Someone's been here since the crash. She frowned. Impossible. The site's restricted. He flipped a switch, rerouting the capsule's sonar feed to manual. A new signal echoed back. Rhythmic, intentional, identical to the one from the harbor. 2 short, 1 long. The same handshake code. It's coming from the forward compartment, Elias said, adrenaline breaking through his calm. That's where she worked. Elias, Clara said quietly, you don't know what's active down there. We could destabilize the hull. He turned, eyes steady. Then we do it carefully. She hesitated, then nodded. Copy that. They docked the capsule against the wreck's side airlock, pressure balanced with a low groan. The interior lights flickered, revealing narrow corridors filled with drifting silt and the ghostly outlines of instruments. Their headlamps cut through the dark in narrow cones of white. Each step sent a small cloud spiraling upward, like dust disturbed in a forgotten church. Clara followed close, her voice low in the comms. This place feels alive. Elias didn't respond. His attention locked on a faint blue glow ahead. The communications room, the source of the signal. When they reached it, he stopped dead. A console still hummed with power, a miracle, or something far stranger. He brushed a layer of sediment from the screen. Letters flickered to life, one by one, across the cracked glass. Commander Wren. Final recording active. His breath caught. She left something. Clara swallowed. Elias, be careful. He pressed play. Static filled their headsets. Then, her voice. If you're hearing this, it means the mission failed, or maybe it didn't. Maybe it just changed shape. He froze. It wasn't an echo. It wasn't code. It was her. They told me to shut it down, said the ocean didn't need eyes. But it does, Elias. Something's moving down here, something not ours. The system will keep listening. Promise me you'll listen too. The transmission cut, replaced by the same sonar tone. 2 short, 1 long. Clara whispered, "She built it to call you back." Elias stared at the console, his reflection trembling in the dim light. She knew this would happen. Another message blinked on the screen. Mission status. Complete. Data transfer ready. Recipient. E. Wren. He hesitated, then inserted his wrist tag, the old command identifier he'd kept hidden all these years. The console glowed brighter. A low hum filled the compartment as streams of data flowed across the monitor. Sound files, logs, coordinates. But beneath it all, a final line appeared in plain text. You found me. Elias felt his throat tighten. Clara placed a hand on his shoulder. You can bring her home now. He nodded slowly, voice barely a whisper. No, she never left. A deep rumble shuddered through the hull. Not an explosion, not movement, just pressure releasing, like the ship exhaled after years of silence. Outside, the sea seemed to glow faintly as the Providence's systems went dark one last time. The capsule's sensors spiked. We have to surface, Clara said. Pressure's shifting. Elias took one last look at the console, at the faint blue shimmer that pulsed like a heartbeat. Goodbye, Hannah, he said. Mission complete. Then he turned and followed Clara back through the corridor. As they detached from the wreck, the ocean reclaimed its quiet. The Providence disappeared below them, swallowed by the dark, but not gone. Through the static of the comms, one last whisper cut through the deep. "Safe journey, Commander." The submersible broke through the surface like a breath, returning to lungs that had forgotten how to fill. Morning light shattered across Rockford Bay, scattering gold across the waves. The sea was calm again, too calm, as if pretending nothing had happened in its depths. Inside the capsule, Elias Wren leaned against the viewport, his reflection ghosted over the water beyond. Clara sat beside him, drenched in silence, her hands still trembling from the dive. "Pressure normalizing," she said, voice low. "We're clear." Elias nodded but didn't answer. His gaze stayed fixed on the horizon, where the world met the impossible. In his lap, the drive they'd recovered blinked once, steady and slow. The final data transfer had completed. Providence's last heartbeat carried home. He whispered, "She kept her word." Clara watched him, eyes soft. "What will you do with it?" He exhaled. "Tell them the truth, all of it." Outside, the sea rolled gently beneath them, and for the first time, it didn't feel hostile. It felt awake, listening. A single sonar tone echoed faintly through the hull. Two short, one long. Elias smiled through the ache in his chest. "Goodbye, Hannah." He looked out at the endless blue and realized it no longer looked like loss. It looked like return. When the Harriet Blue reached the docks, Maya stood waiting, violin case in hand, eyes full of worry. Elias stepped onto the pier, salt water dripping from his gloves, and simply said, "She heard you play." Maya didn't ask how, she just hugged him, tight and wordless. This story is now part of our legacy. Share it so it will never be forgotten. Subscribe to hear the stories no one told until now.